Hey everybody, this is John for MTG Nexus now with MTG Nexus Red on this channel instead of MTG Nexus VODs. So, TLDR, there's been a change in content to where I am no longer doing a recording of the live stream videos, basically because they're being simulcast to the respective channels, MTG Nexus, which obviously is our Modern channel, and Pioneer Nexus MTG, which is our Pioneer channel. So this kind of left this channel with a bit of a void. This channel has primarily always been red-based content, especially Burn. Did a couple other videos, Izzet Murktide, Mardu Reanimator. Those have since been removed from the channel, back to the main channel. And this channel is going to be exclusively modern red Ekro-based content, obviously primarily Burn. We're going to do a little bit of Prowess here and there, and a little bit of Domain Zoo. Figure that's kind of all on theme for red-based aggro. And to that end, we're going to be doing our first kind of video as just the MTG Nexus Red brand. Obviously, the banner and stuff haven't been updated, but the channel has been rebranded to MTG Nexus Red. So we're working with the same list that we top 16 the challenge with in today. This is a Modern Prelim event. These are kind of harken back to the old MTGO dailies. They're a 4-round event. The prize mainly for them is the play points. You use these to qualify for bigger events like the Showcase Opens or PTQs and stuff. And basically, these are people that are going to be taking the event quite seriously. So you probably may even see a higher quality on average opponent than even you would see in the Modern Challenges, or you might even see in your local PTQs. That said, so a lot of these matches are going to be incredibly tight. You're going to have some incredibly skilled opponents on the other side of the equation. So nice way to measure up to see how Burn stacks, and I myself as a Burn pilot, how I do against some of the better pilots of their decks. This is basically stock Boros Burn, the sole exception, Zurgo Bell Striker. Zurgo is a card that's been a little bit contentious. People were like, how dare you, mess with traditional Burn. Obviously some people messing with Cutting Eidolon the Great Revel. One thing I've noted over the last several months is that Burn needed to get faster. And the only way for Burn to get faster is either A, to try to go down to more one-drop spells, and really you have to splash a third color for that in the form of Bump in the Night, or get a good one-drop creature. Now there is a plethora of one-drop creatures that are good aggro creatures, but not necessarily good in Burn. So the difference between an aggro creature and a Burn creature is Burn creatures typically have to have either haste or some effect that you can guarantee damage. Whereas a deck like, Zoo or 8-Whack takes advantage more of the fact of they play a plethora of creatures, force your opponent to answer all of them, and they either hit really, really hard or, they scale throughout the game. Same thing kind of with Prowess. Prowess has Swift Spear, Soulscar Mage, Sprite Dragon, occasionally Stormwing Entity. Some of them now play Ragavan and DRC. Burn is more looking for haste. We're not trying to put a couple creatures into play and then pump them up. We're just trying to get each one of our cards individually has to account for damage. So to that end, there's been a lot of things tried out. You've seen Reinforced Ronin, you've seen Wild Nacatl, you've seen Ragavan, you've seen DRC. There's another one that I can't think of off the top of my head, and I always forget it. It's the one-drop goblin that every time it deals damage, you have to return a land to your hand. Most of them are trash. Obviously, Swift Spear and Goblin Guide have kind of been the default one-drops for Burn in that regard. Another one people suggested was Gitu Lava Runner. The problem with Gitu Lava Runner is it requires 2 spells to be in your graveyard for it to have haste, so often not coming online until turn 3 at the earliest, unless you have like the draw of Gitu Lava Runner, double one-drop spell, but that's kind of a corner case scenario. Now Zurgo is not better than Ragavan in the abstract. Ragavan, very simply, is a broken card. It's a card that will probably at some point get banned in Modern. It's going to happen eventually. Zurgo has a lot of the same keys as Ragavan, other than playing cards off the top of your opponent's deck. It's a 2/2 for 1 mana. It does have the dash ability, so it does potentially have haste in the mid-game if you have like an opening where you can connect. And the downside, can't block bigger creatures, whereas, Ragavan obviously you can use as a chump blocker. Positives for it, it's a lot cheaper. Doesn't die to run in 6, which otherwise Burn just doesn't care about. And then finally, it can attack into things like Esper Sentinel, Stoneforge Mystic, an Delirious DRC, a Ledger Shredder that's still a 1/3, etc., whereas something like Ragavan cannot. So, some corner case scenarios, but some situations where Ragavan is specifically better. Rest of the list, one myth thing, I've cut a Deflecting Palm. Most people are playing around it at this point, so its effectiveness is kind of lost. Sure, you can kind of pseudo bluff it. In its place, we basically are playing copies of Exquisite Firecraft. Now, Firecraft is there because the blue decks are a thing. Living End, Rhinos, Murktide, even Creativity are all red bait, or all have blue permission. This allows you to punch through that last bit of damage. Relevant in a matchup where Izzet Murktide, where I think Burn is kind of a dog at this point. So, that said, let's get into some matches and see how we do in this Modern Prelim. Alright, taking a look at our opening hand, we are on the mull. We are on the mull and on the draw. So, not the best of starts. We mulligan to 6 here. This hand, probably keepable. Probably put back Boros Charm here. And kind of hope for the best. Opponent opens on Steam Vents into nothing. So, a couple of plays here we had options to. We could play out Zurgo. Decent chance it gets bolted or Unholy Heated. Still might have been the correct play. Suspend Riftbolt, they can't spell pierce anything. But unfortunately our opponent had to consider, so we kind of got punished either which way, but we're going to need to draw a second land to be relevant in this game in a timely fashion anyway. Our opponent hits us with a spell pierce, so we hit a second land, we suspend a Riftbolt and cast a Zurgo. Our opponent had an Unholy Heat, so quite likely our opponent had at least either a spell pierce or an Unholy Heat, possibly both. They play a Blood Moon, annoying, but as long as we don't draw any of our white spells, we're good. Against Goblin God gets in for some damage. Our opponent plays a Ledger Shredder, holding up potentially Spell Pierce here. We play another Goblin God attack. Notably, you don't want to play a second spell, so they just get an automatic trade here. Opponent does get a bounce block, really. Put them to 7. They have Iteration. They choose to not iterate, holding up, presumably Counterspell or something. We just continue to pressure them as much as possible. They're going to be drawing a Murktide next turn, which might present an opportunity, but once again, they're still kind of holding up Counterspell stuff. They play Iteration. Very, very patient opponent here. They bolt that. Get in for some damage here. We go ahead and cast Searing Blaze at the end of step. We do that, and we pass. We probably should have gone for the kill here. Kind of hoping that they tap mana out at this point, or tap out for Murktide Regent or something. We might have been playing this game way too cautiously. Just threatening to double bolt. They can only have one piece of interaction these couple of turns. Unfortunately, our opponent found yet another island. So, they go to combat. I think we take this opportunity here to try to kill them. And opponent gets to loot, which is unfortunate, but they do not have another Spell Pierce, and they are dead. Alright, taking a look at sideboarding. We boarded out our 4 copies of Eidolon, 1 copy of Skewer. We bring in our 2 copies of Path to Exile to deal with large Ledger Shredders and Murktide Regents. Also bring in Exquisite Firecraft. A lot of people like to bring in Sanctifier back in this matchup. It's a trap. Don't do it. A lot of times they don't care about it, other than obviously they can't remove it. Sure, it does potentially blank DRC and whatnot, but this hand is an interesting opening. 4 lands, you probably should mulligan most of the time. Zurgo into Boros Charm, so I wonder if we mulligan here. Okay, we do mulligan. This hand is quite nice. Probably putting back Riftbolt would be my guess. Just because it's the most awkward card in the deck. Opponent leads on Mishra's Bauble, targeting themselves, setting up a fetch land. They do nothing, so that means our Goblin God's going to get in for at least 2 here. We do want to try to get our Boros Charms out of our hand at an opportune time. Opponent's going to be furious. So they counterspell a Goblin Guide, which is interesting. I guess kind of lacking removal spells possibly, even though that we revealed a Fury to their hand. We play nothing, which is a little bit awkward. They're going to be drawing a Lightning Bolt here. They do nothing. Continue to play nothing. We, once again, trying to constrain them a little bit on stuff. They have a bolt into get another bolt. They're going to fetch away that bolt. So, opponent's at 9. We're kind of keeping this land in hand because of Searing Blaze, but opponent is playing a very awkward game. Searing Blaze is a very awkward card without it being a fetch land. They play DRC out, which is nice. So next turn we'll get to potentially Searing Blaze something. So opponent once again being very patient, which is very important as a Murktide player. Just continuing to do the thing. We probably should make a move at this point. A little bit tight on resources. And our opponent is, has a hand chock full of stuff. They play Expressive Iteration here. Opponent does another Dragon Rage's Chandler, which is kind of going to force us to do something. They attack because they have to. Here I make the choice to Boros Charm. We draw into a Spell Pierce here. So the downside of this matchup is, especially in the post-board games, they have a lot of early interaction, like things like Flusterstorm, Spell Snare, all these kind of really efficient mana spells. So, we just basically walked into 2 of our spells being countered, although I'm not really sure there's a ton we could have done to play around some of this nonsense. They also have a Ragavan in hand, so they kind of risk closing out the game here. So, once again, our opponent being very patient pays off for them quite nicely. We Lava Spike, they have a counter spell. So, opponent with 3 pieces of early interaction or cheap interaction, very annoying for our deck. We have to try to bolt this stupid Ragavan here, or path it, I guess. Opponent, once again, has a counter spell. So they have Flusterstorm. So it's just not our game when your opponent has Spell Pierce, Spell Snare, Counterspell, Flusterstorm. Probably should have gotten this Swift Spear down at some point. And now if they hit a bolt off of our deck, we just die. So very well played by our opponent. I got a little bit antsy, and it definitely cost us in this match. But on to game number 3. All right, taking a look at our sideboarding. We didn't change anything up before game number 3. It's possible we should have brought in some number of Eidolons, but we are on the play, which is nice. Taking a look at a 1-lander opening a hand. This is probably a mulligan. Immediately mulligan into a mediocre 6, but we have to keep this at this point. Put back one of the fetches. So we're going to get in with some damage with Goblin Guide here. Opponent reveals Spell Pierce, which will be important to play around. We get a Swizzle Spear. Get to do the thing. They have a bolt, they do, so we get to bolt them, put them to 15, and then 13. But unfortunately, we are low on resources, so put them to 12. Opponent considers. Once again, we can't cast anything into a Spell Pierce, though we potentially could have bolted. Opponent has DRC. Once again, we know we're playing into a Spell Pierce, unfortunately. So we go ahead and attack, see if they block. They do not. So once again, we're kind of playing this pseudo-waiting game. Opponent plays yet another fetch. Does nothing with DRC. Really don't like this no attacks, no blocks. It's kind of one of those like, okay, so they finally decide to block. We kill a DRC without having to Searing Blaze it. Opponent once again has a Spell Pierce in hand. Looks like they're going to play a Murktide to really kind of put the pressure on us. This would be what, a 5/5? Yep. Okay. So I choose the Bolt here. This plays around Spell Pierce. They instead have Flusterstorm, so yeah. Draw Boros Charm here, so things get a little interesting. I choose to resolve Boros, or choose to play into the Spell Pierce here. Let this get countered, you know, bounce this, do 2 damage, and then we get to Searing Blaze, kill the... So we fought through a lot of their interaction. They had a Murktide, they have a Ragavan, obviously representing Counterspell here. Still possible I was supposed to go for it, or try to go for it, as they were a little bit tighter on mana there. Now they get to steal stuff off the top of our deck. They get a Bloodstained Mire, Ledger Shredder, go. So the opponent once again kind of reloading on pressure. We play Goblin Guide. Swing in here. I guess I held back because swinging in does no good. They play Expressive Iteration. Unholy Heat to kill our thing. Connive. Once again, our opponent doing a very good job of putting the pressure on us, having a good balance of patience and aggression. You know, they Lava Spike us, put us to that, so they're basically threatening lethal here shortly. We draw Sunbaked Canyon. It's still possible I should have gone for it this turn. We could play around at least Spell Pierce. Obviously, Counterspell is going to get us at any point. That's just kind of how it is. Opponent hits us for 4 here, which means the next turn we're going to have to go for the kill regardless. They get a Swizzle Spear, which they play, which is whatever. I choose to crack. Go to path the whatchamacallit, which I legitimately don't care at this point. You know, we know we're dead next turn regardless, so I was just doing that to try to get a Counterspell out of their hand, and they just have Spell Snare, and, you know, it's kind of hard to fight through all this permission plus pressure, so could have argued that I should have tried to resolve the Boros Charm over the Searing Blaze, but I figured a 5/5 Murktide was enough pressure in play, and then our opponent just had the reload of, you know, Ragavan plus Ledger Shredder, so very well played by our opponent. One reason I do these re-recordings sometimes as opposed to live gameplay is if you noticed the time when I say my opponent was a very good player, they were very deliberate. That's a nice way of saying they took 21 minutes against Burn. So anywho, on to the next match. Alright, we're back for match number 2. Unfortunately, we were on the die roll, or we lost the die roll. 5-lander, just can't keep that. Seems pretty good. Swizzle Spear that. Probably put back Lava Spike here to be my guess. Just because. And opponent leads on Tweet Tweet Birds. Go ahead and bolt the birds. Slow down our opponent's development. They have Yawgmoth and birds. We probably go Eidolon here would be my guess. Yep, Eidolon, because that'll be the only time it gets in damage. Opponent plays, shocks in, plays Eldritch Evolution on Yawgmoth to go grab Greased. Greased makes a chump blocker with this kind of impenetrable wall. Not the best situation for our mostly creature draw. Shock in here, play a Swizzle Spear, play a Goblin Guide, go ahead and Lava Spike, presumably our opponent's face, and then probably swing in with Goblin Guide and Swizzle Spear here. Oh, swing in with everything. Okay. Guess I've just decided that trying to control our opponent's board is kind of useless. Opponent interestingly leaves Eidolon in play, so I guess they're not afraid of it. They're kind of hoping that we'll do ourselves some damage. We go ahead and cast Rift Bolt. Going face. Chumps. And a chord in response. For 3. Go grab Jerry. Looks like their plan is to burn us out. So they put us to 4. And then they just ultimate grist and kill us. So, well played by our Yawgmoth opponent. Good morning. A couple copies of Eidolon. Really didn't have a ton to bring in this matchup. Looks like we just cut a couple Eidolons for a couple copies of Path to Exile. Sanctifier and Vec, not really that good because most of their creatures are green, so it doesn't really exile anything of relevance. Sure, it can swing through a Yawgmoth and a Drawless Messenger, but like I said, most of their creatures are green, so we have an interesting hand, 4 lands, Searing Blaze that. Usually mulligan these style of hands, which I did, into a Zergo plus a bunch of spells, probably put back a Searing Blaze here. And these are the kind of situations where I really like having Zergo as just an additional 1-drop. Go ahead and play this here. Hopefully we'll get to go Zergo into kill your 1-drop. They have no 1-drop, so we go ahead and bolt them, skewer them, put them to 12. Opponent could easily have a Fatal Push, I guess, but they just get hit for 2. They play Wall of Roots and do nothing. We play with Swizzle Spear and attack. Our opponent chooses to block. Once again, we get to kind of punish them here with Searing Blaze. Zergo doing a little bit of work, continuing to pressure the opponent. Play Skewer the Critics. And presumably kill our opponent here, unless they have Endurance, which looks like what they have. They endure on, bringing their graveyard back, killing Zergo, taking 2. With a Blood Artiste. And we top deck Searing Blaze and a land. So our opponent has a Chord for 1, which, unless they had Forged Tender here, really wouldn't matter. So they're just dead. Alright. Close game on the play. Now let's see if we win on the draw. Once again, sideboarding, nothing changes. 2 path in, 2 Eidolon out. This hand looks to be quite reasonable. A little bit painful, but reasonable. So we'll definitely be trying it. Only downside is we have no answer to a 1-drop on the play, but they look like they don't have one. So lead on Goblin Guide. Held on to this fetch land because of Searing Blaze. It goes Wall of Roots into Bird. They do Yawgmoth. They just chump block, which is fine. We suspend Riftbolt and play that. Although I probably should have played Monastery Swiftspear here, honestly. They have a Grist. Grist making chump blockers. Go ahead and Riftbolt their face. Get to go Swizzle Spear here. Attack with everything. If they block with Wall of Roots, we get to Searing Blaze it. Opponent has Ignoble Hierarch. So, a little bit of a premature decision to do there. I guess, you know, Wall of Roots gets to live, which is not the best. Opponent is at 6 or at 7 here, so getting them close to a point where they're dead, but our creatures aren't going to be able to punch through for much more damage. So Lava Spike you. Holding up Searing Blaze. Opponent just chumps away their board. Once again, kind of playing into their strategy here. We go ahead and Lightning Helix this guy. Otherwise, they get to gain a bunch of life. Gets that back. And Yawgmoth comes into play. Grist. Now we need to top deck again. Sadly, we don't. We draw a land. Once again, I attack in. probably turns out to not be the best idea the way our opponents... If you look the way our opponent's been kind of aggressively setting things up, they're just chumping away, and then they're using Grist to kind of like finish off the game, so to speak. They get to hit us for 4 here, and they proliferate, sacrifice Ignoble, sacrifice that, and then they just ultimate Grist and kill us. So, very well played by our Yawgmoth opponent. I perhaps got a little bit too aggressive, although I guess in the end it wouldn't have mattered a ton because of Yawgmoth and company. But us being aggressive did play into their strategy overall, and they were able to get there with Grist ultimates twice. So, well played by our Yawgmoth opponent. Round number 3, kind of make or break, because if you don't win the last 2 matches in these prelims, you basically get nothing. So we'll be on the play against Dragon. We have a fairly good opening hand. Obviously the downside of no 1-drop creatures. We're up against a Kahira deck, so that generally indicates either blue-white control or Omnath Elementals, but still a perfectly reasonable hand. We just lead on Lava Spook here. Lava Spike. Opponent leads on that, so still could be either deck at this point. We resolve Bolt. No, we resolve a Boros Charm. Okay. Could have been the right situation for Bolt plus thing. Just pass here. Most likely blue-white control at this point, so no reason to take any game actions. As you wondering why I'm not suspending Rift Bolt, because Teferi Time Raveler is a thing. Just don't want to get got by that card. I've gotten so many times suspending a stupid Rift Bolt that way. We suspend a Rift Bolt, which kind of goes against what I've been saying. Our opponent, a little bit too tucked out here for their own good. That is one thing I noticed in these prelim situations is we go ahead and do that, and our opponent just has nothing. So one thing I've really noticed in these like prelims, and to a lesser extent in the challenges, you see these opponents with like these really like teched out decks. One thing I'm gonna be working on the main channel is like going through like the stock version of every deck and kind of like the choice spots you have, like the flex slots. If you look at a deck like our round 1 opponent with Murktide, they had Blood Moon in their main deck. Perfect card to splash, but it takes away from your ability to have like Archmage's Charm, dive down, dress down, any of those kind of stuff. Our blue-white control opponent here had the wrong half problem against Burn. They drew both Hallowed Moonlight and Dress Down. Dress Down can have some moments against Burn where it's fine, like taking away haste of a creature. Or, say I'm playing an Eidolon, they play it in response, Eidolon loses its ability for a turn, different things like that. But generally, these are 2-mana cantrips you don't want to be taking against Burn. And somehow you have 7 cards in hand, but no counterspell, so you die. Granted, we did have another way to kill them if they had, like, regular counterspell, but I digress. Sideboarding, blue-white control, Searing Blaze. Sure, you might have some targets, you might have some Solitude, you might have some Shark Typhoon tokens. Obviously, you could potentially also get Kahira in some spots, but Rift Bolt, not the best card in the world. Both because of Teferi Time Raveler and bringing our own copies of Roiling Vortex. A little bit less thought about. So you notice we bring in our copies of Smash the Smithereens. A lot of these blue-white control decks have chalices in some numbers, both possibly in the main deck and in the sideboard. So that was kind of a split there. We board in Firecraft, Smash the Smithereens, and our copies of Exquisite Firecraft, boarding out those 8 cards. So that's why we board in Smash the Smithereens. Doesn't seem like the most obvious choice, but blue-white. This hand, 4 lands, but a pretty decent opener. You could argue keeping this hand because of Sunbit Canyon. Honestly, don't remember if I keep it or not. Looks like I did, question mark. Okay, opponent mulligan to 5, so we're kind of get to punish them here. We, draw Rolling Vortex. Opponent has Chalice. Surprise, surprise. We play Goblin Guide. We play Lava Spike, mainly get all of our 1-drops out of our hand. Draws Memory Deluge. They fetch away because clearly they are stuck on lands, and this game wasn't particularly interesting. But, blue-white control, folks. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Here it looked really bad. But a nice break after the kind of whitewashings in the first 2 rounds. So, all right, we're back for match number 4 here. We're on the play this game, so that's nice, obviously. Playing for kind of all the marbles for us. A Giganta opener, not really sure what that indicates. Could be Shadow, could be Breach, potentially Tron. This hand is good, a little bit potentially problematic because no 1-drop opening creature. Opponent mulligans. We're probably going to lead on Riftbolt here, simply because it's the best card to get out of our hand. Opponent leads on Blossoming Marsh. Still have no idea what's going on here quite yet. We go ahead and unload our hand. Opponent plays Profane Tutor. So, still not quite understanding what's going on here yet. Underworld Cookbook. So we're up against some type of Asmo, possibly Asmo Reanimator pile. We draw Eidolon. Not the best place to draw that, that's for sure. Opponent hits Profane Tutor. They go to 3. Okay. Opponent discards an Atraxa. Brings back the Atraxa. Goes to 1. Gets Atraxa. Gets to draw a bunch of cards. Including another Goryo's Vengeance. They get to smack us. Go back to 8. They get to Goryo's. We untap. Hope to draw a way to kill them. We do not, unfortunately. And put our opponent to 5 or 6 to 3. And then they just get to Goryo's again? Question mark. Did I prematurely concede here? I actually screwed up here. I'm just now realizing it as I'm looking at it. We should not have conceded until our opponent showed us another Atraxa, because I forgot about the exile clause on Goryo's. And if you look at the cards that were revealed by... we did not actually see our opponent's ability to win the game. Although, food token here, plus they have a Boseiju, good chance we were going to lose this game, but I actually should not have conceded until they showed us a second copy of Atraxa being discarded. So, premature concession, although at this point, if our opponent plays well, we're likely to lose because of the food tokens, but I digress. Looks like I didn't really adjust sideboarding. Eidolon's out, Riftbolt's out, same cards in. So I guess I brought out Eidolons on the draw, so we brought in Path to Exile and what, Wear Tear? Not sure if that's correct, but feels like we over sideboarded this game. Early pressure plus a path for an Atraxa seems reasonable. Opponent goes turn 1 Cookbook. Okay. We go turn 1 Zergo. Opponent goes turn 1, put their Atraxa in the graveyard, bring it back. Put Atraxa in the graveyard, bring it back. And they get to swing their life total up. That gets exiled. We swing with Zergo. Definitely screwed up this particular turn. Inquisition us, take our path. Get an Emrakul, bring Emrakul back. I mean, I would like to say that was a good match, but it really wasn't. Our opponent was on Asmo Reanimator. I don't know if the Emrakul's are main deck or if they're in their sideboard. Obviously, it's a good swerve for things like Sanctifier and Vec, but yeah, Emrakul's going to get us there, unfortunately, after getting smacked by Atraxa, plus we're sacrificing our entire board. I certainly missed some damage by not playing my creatures out pre-combat, but much as the round 3 match was very much in our favor, game number 2, this game number 3 wasn't particularly close, and we had some takeaways. I was a little bit too aggressive against Yawgmoth, playing right into their grist plan, so our opponent had a game plan. They played it very well. Murktide player played excellently round 1. We unfortunately failed to top deck in a couple spots, but that's magic sometimes. You play your cards to the best of your ability. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. You try to learn your lessons as best as possible and try to play the game as well as you can, and hope you get there sometimes. So 1-3 in this prelim, not exciting, but we did learn a lot of lessons. It was nice to step up in competition a little bit every now and again and learn some lessons, even as a burn player for a deck I've been playing for probably it's getting really close to 7-8 years now. So lessons learned, but Zergo still seemed pretty reasonable in this thing. I'm not going to necessarily take it out of the list quite yet. I know people talking about being the budget Ragavan and all that, but it serves its purpose. So if you want a budget version of Ragavan for a 3rd 1-drop, Zergo's kind of your card. Beyond that, pretty stock burn list. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you like burn content, and hope to see you for next week's video.